Hey guys, it's your favorite sisters with the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast. On the show, you'll hear caregivers confessing the good, the bad, and the completely unexpected. You're guaranteed to relate, be inspired, leave with helpful tips and resources, and of course, laugh. Now, let's jump right in to today's guest confession. If you like pina coladas,
We talked about this before we got on.
caught in the rain.
If you're not into
health foods.
if you have
half
a
a
brain.
brain.
That's it.
Okay, we got to stop now because
now.
I don't know the rest of
Yeah.
the songs, and I don't know if we have to have that licensed.
Oh, that's possibly true.
But it's still singing in my head. You know what? It is
edit.
edit. Andy's our producer. We love you, Andy.
We don't want to go to jail, Andy.
Please don't let us go to jail. We don't look good in orange that way, especially JJ. Your red hair. You do not look good.
Are you making fun of my red hair?
Nope. I think it's beautiful, but I think UT orange does not work for you. And that's University of Tennessee, not University of Texas.
Yeah,
Texas is a
there.
bit more burnt orange than the bright, shiny orange of the volunteer state.
That's right.
Oh, anyway. All right. But this is not a podcast about orange in your hair.
Yeah,
Or
that's true. It's
singing,
not a
actually.
beauty show.
It is not. It is a good day to have.
A podcast.
My gosh, man. And we have a powerhouse caregiver today. She is awesome. Like, she's my bestie. She was my best friend first.
They're always your besties. And
I meet them first.
I would like, Amy, if you would just be my bestie when we're done, I would really appreciate that. I don't have any besties because Natalie steals them.
I have them all. Hey, you know what? Let's talk about Amy.
Okay.
Hey, Jay, tell our listeners and our viewers.
I would love to share about Amy because she's not my bestie, but she's going to be.
She is your bestie.
Because I'm the best.
It's coming.
It's
coming. Thank you, Amy. Look at
There
her.
it is. There's the voice.
There's the voice. So today, actually, to be very serious, serious time, Natalie, suck it up. Okay. Today's guest is Amy Shaw, and she is a woman who proves that when life hands you the unexpected, you roll out the red carpet anyway. Amy's journey is absolutely remarkable. After years of living abroad and raising 10 children.
10. That's double digits.
Yeah, double digits. She and her husband, Brian, faced a new chapter. Brian was diagnosed with a terminal illness, but instead of letting the diagnosis define them, Amy and Brian chose to celebrate life.
That's right.
This mindset became the inspiration behind Walk the Red, a program Amy created to help those with terminal diagnosis and their caregivers end well. Amy puts it simply, we're all on the red carpet. We all get to decide how we live and how we die. Now, Amy's caregiving story started long before Brian's diagnosis.
Sure did.
And Amy didn't see it that way. She and Brian were caregivers. They were raising children. They had 6 who they adopted internationally with special needs.
I love
She's been
that.
a caregiver for a long time.
She has been
as a mom.
caregiver.
But when Brian's cancer returned, caregiving took on a whole new intensity. From a research champion to a networking queen, Amy did it all.
Oh my gosh, now I've got Dancing Queen in my head.
I know.
Queen.
And
Sweet. Sorry.
okay. And as Brian's life came to a close, she learned what it truly meant to walk alongside someone in their final act.
Oh, I love that.
Amy-
It's like a love story.
It is. I love
They're a love
stories
story.
and family stories. And Amy, we are so glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honor.
I'm going to
You're
tell
so-
you. Oh, thank you. Well, you know what? I'm going to tell you guys, this is one worth, like everybody has different backgrounds if you think about it. And Amy is an artist. And so her background is beautiful. Like you get to see her artwork too, as you're listening and viewing the
dog.
The dog. It's the dog artwork behind you that had me. I'm like, that's a happy dog back there.
In my actual bedroom.
Oh.
You see where I sleep at night.
Your boudoir. I love that. Amy has a beautiful place. Amy, thanks so much for being with us. We're happy to have you and so privileged to get to hear your story. I know when we talked that I just left feeling so good. And even in the hard, there is so like the lessons that you learn. You never stop learning. And I feel like Amy's going to share that with us. Amy, let's start in the beginning. You were born. And then, skip to the good part. But give us a little background about where you're from, siblings. I love birth order. So just a little bit and then get us on up to that love story.
Sure. Yes. I was born indeed. I was the first long-awaited child my parents, who were college sweethearts from Ohio State University. So I was born in Columbus, Ohio.
Buckeye.
And I grew up in the same house. In fact, my mom is still living there. My dad has since gone on to glory, but my mom is still living in that house where I grew up. So yeah. And then my mom had a blessing child where we adopted my sister. Domestic adoption, and then surprise of all surprises.
That's what happens.
My mom on a vacation in Florida found out she was expecting my brother. So my brother and I are 7 years apart. My sister and I are about 3.5.
Yeah.
So,
it's so funny.
So I launched from Ohio.
Exactly. I mean, it's so funny. I've known several people who chose to go the adoption route when they were unable to conceive. And then lo and behold, an oopsie baby, like a surprise blessing baby, comes right along. And I have friends of ours that have done that. But so you grow up a Buckeye.
Back up. She's the oldest. I just want to focus on that. You're the oldest.
I did notice that she was the oldest.
We want to call that out. Sorry.
We're connecting.
That's exactly right. BFF.
You just missed the fist bump through the camera. I just think that's
called it out.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm used to being yellow mustard. And so, but everybody puts mustard on hot dogs.
Yeah.
And, so you grow up, you're a Buckeye. Are you still a Buckeye?
I am. I'm in South Carolina right now, but I am absolutely a Buckeye. Very proud of my team who won the national championship.
That's right. The Ohio State. We're like giving props to them. They did a great job. Again, not a football podcast. And, but, so you grow up and then what happens? You're 18, you're getting to adulthood. When do you meet Brian?
So actually, my parents and his parents knew one another before we were born. They were both attending the same church. And then, life took Brian's parents to California. He was actually born there. Then they moved back and they ended up settling in the same small suburb of Columbus. We ended up going to the same junior high and high school together, but we didn't know it. So I was 2 years ahead of him. And so in high school, our parents recognized each other. So they hadn't seen each other in years and said, hey, we should introduce our kids. And so Brian was quiet. He was a farm boy. He never did anything at school. He was not in athletics or anything. I was bubbly and, I had all the friends. And
this is why our besties.
Nice to meet you. And then, I was off. And then later we went to a pretty big high school, like 800, I think, in my class, in each class. And so occasionally I would see him and he was super, super blonde and tall. And I would see him and think, I think I'm supposed to know that kid, but I can't remember his name.
I'm older. I'm a senior.
So, fast forward, I go to college, he goes to college. I'm not at the same school, but I went on a mission trip one summer. And when I came back, my parents were like, we're going to a new church. I'm like, oh, okay. That was kind of out of the blue. And at that church was Brian and his family. And so I went to the college and career class and there he was. And we were friends in there for 3 years and I never thought anything. He actually, so that mission trip, I went to Haiti and he had also gone to Haiti. So even after we're back in our colleges, we wrote, this is pre-internet, we wrote letters back and forth to each other about Haiti, not having any idea we were each other's love. He is the love of my life, was the love of my life, still is.
Yeah.
And I was his and we didn't know it. And so finally in 95, I was waiting on a visa because I was going to go be a school teacher in Indonesia and my visa kept getting delayed. And he was working at a dairy farm and he grabbed a cow because he was mad at her and she kicked him and broke his arm. So he couldn't work. So he was didn't have anything to do. And I remember him being like, I can help you pack. And I was like,
oh, with one arm. That's sweet.
You want to fold my underwear? What do you want to do? But he, at some point in there, asked me out for a date. And the rest is history. Like, we knew we wanted to marry each other within a week.
Oh.
But I had committed 2 years to be in Indonesia. And so really, I think that separation, and we wrote letters, and that was like the dawning of email. And you remember dial up?
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We all know it. All the young people are like, what is that noise?
Yeah.
what is dial up? And it was extra like lengthy to connect when I was in Indonesia, because I was in a really rural area. And so we would try to connect maybe and send an email, but really we relied on letters, and he sent me letters, and it would take 3 weeks to get a letter back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually got sick. I got very, very sick with 2 different types of malaria, and I only ended up staying 5 months and came home, recovered, and he asked me to marry him.
Oh.
my God.
And then we got married that fall.
Oh, I love a love story, Jay. Letters.
big.
Reminds me of Bob.
I love that.
Bob and Gretchen.
Yeah.
They were love letters
I
too.
love letters.
I love
too.
letters.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys get married, and it's interesting how God's plan really does what it's supposed to. Like, I can see it, like, oh, isn't that neat? I love that. And so you guys get married, and you guys now, do you have, because you have 4 biological children, and then you have 6 adopted children, and you're mom to all 10, clearly. And so those are just technical terms. You're the mama. I know that you had mentioned that you really never saw yourself as a caregiver, but how did you have your biological children first? How did the choice to be adopted? Because we're gonna talk about Brian, but I do want to talk a little bit about that, the adoption side.
Yeah, we did have biological children first. And our intention was to have a large family. I wanted 10 children. He was also the oldest. He was the oldest of 2, and he thought maybe 4 would be good.
Oh, wow.
So we decided to meet in the middle at 6. And so kind of and so we tried to have children, and it wasn't happening fast. And that was kind of a shock, kind of a surprise. I guess I shouldn't have been too surprised, because my mom did struggle with that.
True.
But we did across 9 years, because the story can take too long, but it took 9 years, and we got to 4 children. And I had lost I had lost 2 babies, and then we had a full term 39-week stillborn son. And that was so devastating. And really, I didn't want to end on a loss. We had this weird pattern where it was like, have a baby, lose a baby, have a baby, lose a baby, have a baby, lose a baby. And I didn't want to end on lose a baby.
That's like an emotional roller coaster. Yeah.
And it took another 2 years after that loss to become pregnant again, but I finally did. And so we ended at 4 children.
Yeah.
And I really just, still wanted to have more, but I knew that I could not do that again. It was just so deeply emotional.
Yeah. And so you decided to adopt. And not just adopt, hey, I want to, so many people think of adoption and they think of healthy little babies that are teeny babies. And I've worked in the foster care system for 25 years. And the children who are the hardest to adopt typically are older, they're teenagers, or they have differing abilities. And so you and your husband decided to do something different.
Something different. Yeah. Well, Brian had been listening to a podcast and kind of getting educated about the need in sub-Saharan Africa for adoptive families for these babies, because, the AIDS epidemic had just wiped out that middle generation. And so all these children and babies were going and living with the grandparents, and the grandparents weren't going to, maybe live very long. So the orphanages were just very full. And so he asked me, what do you think? Would you consider international adoption? And I don't know. The Lord had been doing his own work on my heart. And so he called me from work on a Monday, and by Wednesday we were starting paperwork. So we don't waste time. We really don't waste time.
I love that. I'm very much a decision maker. Yeah, I don't need to think about it. JJ is like going to mull on it, chew on it. It's like almost like I don't want to call you a cow, but how cows have 4 stomachs and they chew on it for a while. They come up.
And moving on. So 6 kids, 6 additional babies over what amount of time? How long did you guys?
So we brought home our son Zeb in 2011, and we brought home our last 2 girls in 2016. So it was 5 years. We brought 6 kids from.
You are growing fast. I love
it. Was really crazy because we didn't have tons of money sitting around. So we fundraised, and that's really how my art got started because, I was always creative and stuff, and I always loved to paint, but I wasn't any good. And I started auctioning off art for one of our daughters' adoption fees. And I was really convinced that people were just doing this to help her come home. And it really wasn't very good. It really wasn't.
Thank those people. We appreciate all those people that got this baby home, this daughter home. So I love that. I love that that you all allow your faith to lead you in so much. I love to hear that.
Well, and also you had mentioned to me that the children that you chose were children that had differing abilities. And
yeah, we did. And, some of that was interesting. So we had always wanted to go back overseas. We lived overseas in that period of 9 years where we were only there for 2 years, but during that time where we were building our biological family, and we were planning on a career of mission work. And when our son was stillborn, everything shifted, and we ended up going to a different part of Ohio to live. And it just so many things. It felt like our lives shut down. I remember Brian saying, why would God put us on a shelf? Why would he put us and say, we're so willing to go. We're so willing to do this. And he's like, nope, I'm just going to set you up here on the shelf. And we struggled with that a lot.
Yeah.
And we tried to get back overseas. And the door would just close for one reason or another all the time. And I remember after we brought Zeb home thinking, well, first of all, I had fallen in love with this photo of this little boy, and he had a condition that I couldn't even pronounce. And now I can. I've worked at it. But I remember suggesting, like, what if we can't go to the mission field until, maybe we're done raising children, why don't we use that time to give a child a family? And this was, a boy in China who had, malformed limbs. And in that society, he's not able to care for his family. Back then you could only have one child, and that's why there were so many girls in orphanages in China. But when a boy was born with something that would inhibit him from caring for his parents, they would kind of try again for a healthy child. Yeah. And so he was going to grow up in this orphanage. And I remember just saying, if we're not able to go until later, then maybe what we want to do is do this. And he was on board. And really, I remember he coined a phrase. I'm sure you've heard it. We'll knock on the door with a feather. That famous phrase that everyone says every other day. I was like, what does that mean, Brian? What do you mean? What? We'll knock on the door with a feather? He's like, well, we'll just approach it and knock on the door. And if the door pushes open with the feather, then we'll know that we're supposed to do it. And I was like, okay, I'm game for that. So
I've never heard of that, Amy. I've never heard that expression.
I'm joking. I'm totally joking.
Oh, I was like, I've never heard that, but it makes sense. We'll knock on the door with a feather because it's almost like I'm a little nervous about it, but if it's meant to be, the door will open. And I love that.
This will be the beginning of the entry into, the colloquial usage of knock on the door with a feather.
Perfect.
Oh gosh. Yes. And the door flew open. And so we brought him home, and he is taller than me now. I think he was 2 years old when we brought him home, and he's 14 and taller than me and just doing amazing things.
Oh, I love that. All right. Well, we're past our little time. Let's take a break real quick, and let's jump in because we're going to have another podcast about the adoption side, because it really is an entire conversation. We'll be right back. Hey ladies, I need to interrupt for just a second to share about the Sisterhood membership. It's basically a sale every day, and the best part, it's free. Here's the details. We're partnering with our friends at Benefit Hub and other care partners to save you money. With over 200,000 participating companies across the U.S. and abroad, you'll find discounts at your favorite local stores, huge savings on vacations, amazing deals on home, auto, and supplemental insurances, and everything in between. Go to confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com to sign up, and then definitely tell your friends about it. They can join too. Trust me, there's a discount for everyone. And don't forget, it's free. Okay, back to confessing. Do you love to listen to podcasts? So do we. And these sisters are excited to support our fellow sister in care, Nicole Will, host of Navigating the World with Your Aging Loved One. As former guests ourselves, we love how Nicole explores the world of aging and care. Beyond the informative interviews, Nicole's gathered helpful resources and practical tools that encourage and give hope to caregivers navigating the aging journey with their loved ones for a more meaningful and fulfilled life. You can find Nicole wherever you download your favorite podcast or go to her website, www.willgather.com.
All right, everybody, we are back with Amy Shaw. We're dancing. Yeah, we forgot to take our dance break.
Dance break.
So she's been a caregiver for so long. If you missed that 10 minutes, go back, because you got to listen to that. But she said she and Brian are taking care of 10 children of varying abilities. But something kind of comes up. You're surprised by an event. So what happens with Brian?
So it was March morning in 2018. And I had heard Brian say that the guys at work had the flu. And I think we'd been married maybe 20, 22 years at that point. He had never taken a sick day. He was this, I'm going to push through anyway. So he came home at 9:30. This was very odd. And he went to bed. And I thought, that's so strange. And I had preschoolers. I put them on the bus at 12:30, and I thought, I better go check on him. It's been 3 hours. He also was never a napper. He never liked to take a nap. So everything was really bizarre. But I thought, well, he must really have gotten hit by this terrible flu. And when he woke up, he really struggled to speak. Like, he was saying words, but they didn't make sense. And he was very frustrated that he couldn't communicate. He knew that he wasn't making sense. And he would bend over and he would hold his head because his head hurt, and he was praying. And when he would pray, he was making sense. And then he'd try to talk to me again. It was weird. And I just kept walking out of the room, just like trying to shake it off. Like, what is happening? This is so weird. So Brian was very funny, but this was not the kind of joke he would ever do. So I would come back in and be like, okay, let's try again. And he would just do the same thing. And I told him, like, if you can't knock this off, I'm going to have to call the squad. And he just, at that point, he stood up and he put his hands on my shoulders and he called me our daughter's name. Like, listen to me. And I was like, what? Like, I was just so horrified. So I called them. And I actually went downstairs to wait for them, and I'm pacing, and they came to the door, and I'm explaining, and I bring them up to the bedroom, and he's changed his clothes, and he's sitting there on this side of the bed. And I'm like, oh, okay. So actually you're fine. Like, what? And so they came and they did an assessment. They thought maybe a stroke or something. They ruled a stroke out. And he was so fascinated. So he had a biology degree. And so he was very smart, and he was so overly fascinated by the blood pressure machine. And he would ask them, what is that? How does that work? And they would tell him, and he would ask it all over again. Well, what is that? That is so, wow. And I was like, just horrified in the background, just like, what is going on? What? And they decided to take him to the ER. They wouldn't let me ride with him. So I remember going into the bathroom and looking at the mirror and just saying, what is going on? Like, what do I do? Do I put makeup on? What do I do? And finally, like, okay, I need to go. I need to get in my car and go. So by the, maybe, I don't know how many minutes elapsed. By the time I got to the ER and walked in, the doctor met me and he was like, your husband has a mass in his brain. And I was like, what? Just like the world stopped. Like, wait, I can't even, like, he was super healthy. He was always up early, exercising. I mean, he loved fitness and just life. I mean, he was an active person. He was so thin, he was muscular. He liked his cookies, but otherwise he ate healthy. But it was just like, what? And so they transferred him to a bigger hospital, but in between there, we called the kids out of school. And my oldest daughter was getting on a plane that day to go to Argentina, and she was going to go do some work down there. And I called her. She was in Columbus. We were about 3 hours away from that. And I said, hey, I don't know. I'm sure everything's fine. Dad's in the ER. Actually, I called her before I heard that there was a mass in his brain and said, I'm sure everything's fine. I honestly thought he was maybe having a mental breakdown or something. I mean, we had 10 kids. We had a cow who just, we had a 2-acre little hobby farm. And we jokingly called her the stress cow because Brian was so stressed about what if this went wrong or that. And he was getting up really early, milking her and all this stuff. So there was a lot of stress in our lives. And so I really just kind of thought he just kind of had a breakdown. So I told her, I think you can still go on your trip, but I don't know. And anyway, so she did not go. She came home and all the kids were taken out of school. And I remember our pastor met us at the emergency room, and he told me before the kids arrived, because I had a dear friend who went and collected all the kids and brought them to us. I remember him saying, you have the opportunity to shape how your children are going to remember this day. They're always going to remember this day. You have the power in how you share this with them. And I haven't thought about this in a while, but it was I so appreciate him saying that. And so we brought them in, and, I'm sure they were, very frightened. And why in the world are we out of school? Why are we at the ER? Why is mom, where's dad? Right. And so having to explain, and, we didn't have answers. And so fast forward, he was taken to another hospital. We were given some hope, maybe because we pressed for it, that maybe there was a 3% chance that this little mass in his brain that they were going to remove was just an abscess. Now, how an abscess would have gotten there, I don't know, but that was the hope that we clung to. And we had prayed in all of our social media. We'll remember that we were praying that it was just an abscess. And I was waiting through that surgery and thinking, okay, he's going to come out in 20 minutes and say, it was just an abscess, and we can go back to life. But the surgery went on and on and on. And he came out and he said, well, it was grade 4. And I'm like, what is grade 4? What? It was like, well, I thought it was only going to be grade 3 based on the MRI and all that, but it was grade 4. I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, oh, well, he has primary brain cancer. And I was just so like someone slapped me back and forth. And so we had to wait for the pathology to come, but he was right. He knows what he's doing. And Brian had the most aggressive possible brain cancer. And when they did the DNA of the tumor, he had the most resistant to treatment. And they said, if you don't do treatment, maybe 3 to 4 months. If you choose to do treatment, he might have 6 to 12 months. And we're just like, what?
The theme is what? Like you don't even understand. It's this
Yeah, it's just the
completely
shock of it.
shock.
Like we were busy living life. Like, no.
Well, and I'll tell you this, Amy, when we got the cancer diagnosis, I remember thinking, and this sounds really selfish, but it's true. I don't have time for that. Like we've got a lot of other things that are going on. We've got some life living we got going on. We do not have time for cancer. It sounds like very similar. Like you're like, no, we're busy. We've got some kids and we've got some other plans. We don't really have time for, terminal illness. Like we'd like to not have that.
I think that the whole thing was going to be shut down. Like all of the life that we've been doing, like, and I don't know at what point I started to think, no, wait a second. Wait, no, I don't want to be left to do this by myself. That wasn't the deal. That wasn't the plan. I never once considered that. But we made a choice. So the doctor that removed the staples from his surgery, he did some reading and he was the one who gave us that final, like, yeah, you might have 6 to 12 months. And when we left that hospital, I remember walking out, holding his hand in the parking lot and just squeezing it and saying, okay, we're going to make this the best 6 to 12 months of our lives. Because what else can we do? What else can we do? We have to do this. And, so we had difficult conversations with our kids. We told them what was going on. Our youngest child was 3. Our oldest was 18. And so we had quite the gamut of ages, but I remember sitting around on the floor in a circle and saying, we don't like this. We are scared, but we know that God will take care of us. We don't know how, but we're confident that he will. And so this is what we're doing,
Okay, I'm going to take a break here, Jay.
Okay.
Because and then we're going to come back in because we're going to find out what happens over this next window of time. Okay. And how it impacts you, Amy. Yeah. We'll be right back. I don't know about you, but my inbox is always cluttered with useless emails. But there's one I always open, the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver newsletter. You may say, Natalie, what makes yours so special? Well, I'm biased, but don't just take my word for it. Here's what our subscribers say they love. First, it comes once per month, and you can read it in under 5 minutes. Next, you'll find amazing tips and resources to use in your everyday life. And who doesn't love a recommendation? These sisters do, which is why we share sister-approved products and discount links to save you time and money. And of course, you're first to know about the upcoming month's confessions. Just like our show, you're guaranteed to relate, be inspired, leave with helpful tips and resources, and of course, laugh. Go to our website, confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com, to sign up for our newsletter today.
If you like confessions, we have another podcast we'd love to recommend, the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast with Elizabeth Miller. As a fellow Whole Care Network podcaster, we love how Elizabeth chats it up with family caregivers and dives into their caregiving and self-care strategies. Just like us, Elizabeth believes that family caregivers are the experts in caregiving. Beyond the informative conversations, Elizabeth reveals the tried and true resources and practical self-care tips that empower caregivers to prioritize their health and happiness. You can find the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast wherever you download your favorite podcast, or go to the website at happyhealthycaregiver.com.
All right, everybody, we took our dance break because
We did take a little dance break. We danced it out.
And we are on a heavy topic, though.
We are.
But Amy has this spirit about her that I'm sitting here in awe. I've not said a lot because I'm listening to the story. And, but we're back. They have gotten basically a terminal diagnosis. But her comment to her husband at that at that time was, we're going to make this the best 6 to 12 months that we've got, because the doctor has said, this is it. This is what we've got. Tell me, in those moments, in those times when you're sitting there with the kids, you're talking about how bad this is, but you are that link for them. Like, this is mom.
She's the mama
mom
bear.
is stable. Mm-hmm. What is going through your mind? Where are you at?
I think I'm balancing, I'm reading the room. I'm looking at their faces, looking at the different ways that they're reacting. And you got to remember, 6 of my children have already lost both of their parents.
Mm-hmm.
This is big. And, the 4 biological are staring at something that, none of us knew what was coming, and there is a lag between surgery and the actual diagnosis when that pathology comes back.
Yep.
And that is such a scary window of time when you're like, what if it's this? What if it's this? And it was the worst of all the worst things. And I think, I was reading the room and I was just thinking, God, you're going to show up. I know you're going to show up. Yeah. I don't know how. I really wanted him to heal my husband, like just take it all away. There's so many days that I wanted this to just be a bad nightmare that we were in. It was a nightmare, but it ended. I don't know, maybe I should stop answering that question at that point.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure what I was really going to say, other than I knew that God was going to come through for us, but I didn't know how. And it was just a matter of walking it out.
And it's true. It's the ask that we have versus the answer that we get. Yeah. And they don't always match all the time. And that's the hardest part. And I think in asking and praying for another friend of mine, you wonder, why does this person live versus why this one person doesn't? Why did this happen to this person versus somebody else who's not been living a healthy lifestyle? You start, that's where faith really comes in, and it can impact. And if you go too far down the rabbit hole, you start to lose your faith, you lose your hope. And without hope, for me, there is no, it feels hopeless. So you guys decide, and here's the thing. You're caring for him and you're caring for the children. And how does this, what's the impact? Because do you have moments for yourself? And what are you saying to yourself, really? Like, do you want to just run away and go hide?
All the time. But no, seriously, I think, in the beginning, Brian was very able, and so first of all, spoiler alert, he lives 37 months instead of just 6 to 12.
Showed them.
And now, of course, we didn't know that. Mm-hmm. And every day we didn't know if that was the day that, the other shoe was going to drop or not. Because they always tell you it's going to come back. He ended up having 2 craniotomies, to remove the tumor, and then it grew back, and then both times they got 100% of it. I'm like, great, that sounds so encouraging. But the type of cancer that this is, you can't see all the fingers and all the cells that are spread out, and it's such a fast, aggressive cancer that it grows back. And there often is some time. I have a precious friends that they just celebrated their 10-year mark of when he was diagnosed. And I think it's less than 5% live to be, meet the 5-year mark. Mm-hmm. So he's really an outlier. But back to what I was saying, my husband he did a lot. And so even during most of the time that he lived, he was making hot breakfast. So he never went back to work. And so the kids were like loving this. Dad was creative. He was making sourdough bread every day. He was coming up with inventive hot breakfast which the kids are not getting anymore. I do not make breakfast for them. Like, hey, you're on your own. But so, to say that I was caring for him, the type of care I was doing was researching, was, doing the networking of other people that are battling this. So I don't feel like, I think in my head, I think of a caregiver as the way it was at the end of his life. And when he was having seizures all the time, and I always had to have rescue meds with me, and, where's dad? Where is he? We always had to watch for where he was. But the bulk of that time, we were still being a married couple. Yeah. We were being a happily married couple who had to go to Cleveland Clinic every couple of months to do a brain MRI. And I remember Brian saying, if people didn't tell me I had brain cancer, I wouldn't know it.
That's so interesting. That is just so interesting.
Well, he refused to be defeated. He's like, I'm going to live my life. And I think that would be... It's almost like blissfully ignorant. And I'm not talking about your husband. I'm just talking about like when he's right. If nobody had told me I had brain cancer, I'd just keep on keeping on. Yeah. Like it simply is what it is. And that's what it seems like he had, like what Sue Ryan talks about is this radical acceptance. And he chose to keep living. Yeah. Every second that he had. And, I know that you said, I don't see myself as a caregiver until because of traditional sense of what people think, because they think of it as technical, like physical action of caring for someone, like exactly what you said. But the beauty and the hard part about caregiving is that there is no definition. You probably went in and out of caregiving with him and supporting him through research, through helping him with certain things. And at times it was probably concurrent. I'm a wife and a mother. Well, you're not concurrent on anything. You're like 50 concurrent. You're 50 different job titles at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. I do remember a time, like shortly after in that first year, that he had some cognitive changes, but we didn't know it. And so there were just some times where, he was, and eventually I found out that when he would read something, he wasn't able to comprehend when he was reading. Right. And that kind of a deficit, it ebbed and flowed, like we're saying. And so, I would need to kind of take over that. And, in fact, that's how we found out that he wasn't comprehending things, because he had just always taken care of the mail and read all those technical things. And I just assumed he was doing that like usual, because everything else was kind of back to normal, but he was missing things. And that was hard.
So I know that, I'm still like in amazement that 33 years is, I just love that when that happens to doctors. We're like, you were wrong. So months rather, sorry. It comes back. And this is really what you say is when your caregiving begins, but I think it's been going on for a long time. Tell us about that.
It had felt like, I actually painted this feeling. It felt like we had a dragon that was just floating kind of behind our heads. And he was this dragon of cancer, and we didn't know when he was going to kind of get the power to kind of leash up and lunge down at us. And it was almost like do I feel the hot breath on my neck? Like spin around like, oh no, there's nothing there. Like it would vanish. Yeah. And so every time we went, so there's a term that anyone with glioblastoma knows is called scanxiety, and maybe other people use it too, but there was such legitimate scanxiety. We would know that MRI was coming in March maybe. And the closer we got to that date, I found myself like pulling away from Brian. I would find stupid reasons to be angry at him. And like totally apart from my consciousness, I would find it was a defense mechanism. Yeah. My subconscious said, if you're angry at him and he dies, you won't miss him as much. And so as those scans would approach, those MRI dates would approach, I found myself, just distancing myself, feeling angry. And eventually I figured it out. And I was like, Brian, I'm so sorry. This is what I'm doing. I'm not trying to. I'm not mad at you. I'm scared, and so we would drive the 2.5 hours to Cleveland Clinic to have this thing done, and you wait through it and you have to wait to get the results, and they would be clear over and over and over and over. They were clear. And so that day that they finally were not was like almost like, okay, I'm ready. It was almost like standing at the base of the mountain being like, okay, let's climb this thing, because it was so hard to live in that in between stage. And that was where God told me, I want you to write a book. And I was like, yeah, I don't know how to write a book, and I'm a little busy right now. Have you seen what
I don't know if you know what I'm doing, God. Really?
Did you see that? Yeah.
Did you see what happened?
But I do remember like thinking and praying through that. Like, no, I feel like it's important that I write, because I'm in this window, and that's what I thought I would call a book, something about between diagnosis and death, because that's such a hard unknown. You don't know how it's going to go down, but you've been told it's going to be bad. You've been told it's going to take his life, and you just like, how does this work? I don't know how this works. And so I thought it's important that I write now. And so I did a lot of, not a lot, I did some writing of emotion, like, and I did include those in my book. But I couldn't possibly write a whole book at that point. And, anyway, I was saying something that I wanted to come back to, and I can't remember.
That's okay. JJ has a concussion too. But no, it'll come back to you. It'll come back. I think this is, I can't even believe our time. Our time is like, we're getting towards the end of our time. And so I want to ask you about that, because, when Brian ultimately passed, he passed. When did he pass?
It was April of 2021.
Yeah. And so did you write the book after Walk the Red?
Yes.
And yeah, go ahead.
Kind of concurrent.
Yeah. And so what did you want to say in Walk the Red? What did you want other people who are dealing and walking this journey where there is no final good answer that feels like a good answer, but the reality is we're all going to die. What was your guidance to people?
So the book is actually called Navigating Goodbye.
Oh, I apologize. Right. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Walk the Red is the coaching program that, coming alongside people to help them on a one-to-one basis. But yeah, I think I wanted to give them like, hey, here's a playbook. When we were going through this, it was kind of like, hey, what do you do? Like, I'm so overwhelmed and shocked, and my life was not easy beforehand, but now you lay this layer on and I don't even know what to do. And if I'm honest, I just want to stay under the covers and cry.
Yes.
But I don't have time, and I've got people I have to get up and get to school, and I have to keep going.
Yeah.
So I've created a book to give people, here's what you can do. Here's the section of, here's a mental mind shift on walking the red carpet to the door of eternity, and to understand that there's more to life than just this human experience that we know, this bodily experience. That impacted how we lived as well. And it's also, here are some shortcuts in the medical field. Here's some shortcuts about clinical trials. Here's how to understand clinical trials. I didn't know anything. I didn't know that hospice wasn't a button on my phone that I pushed, because everyone says, oh, we had to call in hospice. And I just thought it was like 911, I didn't understand that there are companies and they do different things and they offer different plans, and there's different services. And if you go with this one, you may not get the same service as someone else might be. So I just didn't understand any of that. So I've explained some of those things. And then I've got a good section in there about how to leave a legacy, because that's something that I do want to make sure that we talk about, is the things that my husband did to leave a legacy, to spend time with each of us. He dated each of the kids. He left us. He always, our whole marriage, would leave me love notes around the house. He would study where my little habits were, and there would be a little love note in the coffee ground, in the in the coffee beans or something.
I
And
love that.
he was just always doing that. And so he continued to do that. I found notes later, and then he spent time in the mornings when he would get up early, even in the very end of his life, where he was writing letters secretly to all of us. And I had 71 letters that he had written, and he had folded them all up like we did in junior high and high school.
Yes.
Would pass, remember those?
Yeah.
In fact, when my kids got them, I'm like, how do I open this?
Oh, that's funny.
Tell you.
Dad's sense of humor.
He did that. And then, some of the things that you think, okay, you're dying. What are those things on your bucket list? What do you want to make sure and do? And Brian was like, hey, I'm going to get everything. I am about to go to heaven and have everything. What do you want to do? I'm like, well, I'm going to go to Paris. So that first year, Brian took me to Paris, and we essentially had a second honeymoon, and it was absolutely my favorite trip I've ever been on. It was so great. But he spent time one-on-one with the kids. He would take his phone and leave voice memos for the kids, like, hey, I'm at your track meet. I'm just so proud of you. I just want you to know, just stuff like that. And then we were blessed to be a family chosen to do a retreat with Inheritance of Hope.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian recorded a legacy video for the kids, an hour long. And that was just such a treasure. And then one day we were sitting in our bedroom weepy because we cried every day. That was part of it. And he told us, he was like, I'll do anything you guys need. I'll just do anything you want. And so my oldest daughter, Jency, she had been thinking about this. And so she took that opportunity and said, Dad, will you walk us girls down the aisle? I'm so sad you're not going to be there for our weddings. And I think she had something really simple in mind, but we did it really big. Our church helped us do this. They really are the ones that made this happen. But Jency wore my wedding gown. Annalie, my next daughter, wore my mom's wedding gown from 1967. And then our younger daughters were too small for wedding gowns, and so they wore beautiful white dresses. And then they all had veils, and Flower Shop made flowers for us. A friend made a wedding cake for us. The church decorated the church. They provided videographer and photographer. And Brian rented a tux, and he walked each of our 6 daughters one by one down the aisle. And that was 9 weeks before he passed. So he wasn't feeling great, but his tumor where that cancer was growing was over his speech center. And so they kept saying, he's not going to be able to speak. He's not going to be able to speak, but he kept being able to speak. And it was such an amazing answer to prayer. But he prayed for each of our daughters, for their future spouses, for their weddings, their marriages. And all of those are recorded. In fact, my daughter gets married in 5 months from today, the day that we're recording this, at least. And so she's going to be able to play that video. And precious moments, bittersweet, but just such a treasure that we have those pictures. And, it's not a typical picture to have a dad with 6 daughters in bridal gowns around him.
Right. But that doesn't matter. Because here's the thing. It doesn't matter if anybody else understands it. They do. So we're going to do quick sister questions. And, I want to ask one before I do the last one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I see you over there crying.
Oh, yeah. No, go ahead.
I'd already heard this. I already did my cry.
Oh my God.
Because I think it's the most beautiful thing, because this is different than our normal podcast, because the thing is you all really cared for one another. He really cared for you as much as you cared for the family. And it was you're such a team, and it's beautiful. Let me ask you this, because I asked you before, what tips would you give to people? What advice would you give to people who are caring for someone with a terminal illness?
I would say, because you don't know how the end is. I used to lay in bed and worry about how I was going to do the end, because he was so self-sufficient for so long. Mm-hmm. And I remember a dear friend of mine, was caregiving for her husband with ALS. And with ALS, you have to do everything for them. And there was a time that she mentioned brushing his teeth. And I don't know why, but that freaked me out. I'm going to have to brush his teeth? Like, and I remember laying in bed and he was asleep. And I just remember churning and like, how am I going to do it? And how am I going to do it? If you can not give in to those kind of worries and live in the moment. Because here's the thing, when you get to those end days, you don't know how the grace of God is going to come and meet you.
That's right.
You don't know who. In fact, I was just thinking about this. I had people from our community volunteer to spend the night on the couch in the room where Brian's hospital bed was so that I could get some rest. And that was the last week of his life. Several women volunteered to do that for me. And, one was a nurse, but I don't think maybe they were all nurses. I bet they were. And they weren't paid to do that night watch. They just volunteered. And I couldn't have anticipated that. I could have lost a lot of sleep, a lot more than I did. So my advice would be, you don't know how the end is going to go down. So don't spend any energy, any emotional energy. And you just have to be disciplined and cut it off and say, nope, I'm not allowed to think about that, and live in the moment and celebrate the moment and do what you can do with what you have, and I think about people. I've had somebody tell me recently, we're just hoping that he can live long enough to see our son graduate. And I thought, maybe in the same way that Brian wasn't there for our daughter's weddings, maybe the son needs to put on his cap and gown and take some photos with his dad, make memories while you can.
Yeah. Go ahead and do it now. You don't have to wait.
Yeah.
Jay?
I start usually the story of my mom and dad because I always say it's a love story. So tell me, in the time that you and Brian had, because I do believe there's so much love in your story, tell me what in that time you learned about love and preparing for that end. Like, tell me what you would share with somebody else in spending those final days together.
We did really love each other deeply, deeply. And in the beginning, I was so disappointed that love was over and marriage was over. And I remember thinking, my marriage is over. Like, it's so sad. It's so sad. And it was my mom who said, no, Amy, you completed your marriage. Like, your marriage vows were until death do you part. You completed them. And boy, have I hung on to that. That is such a
Wow.
That gives me cold chills. You completed it.
You completed it. That's
we
wonderful.
completed our marriage. Yeah.
And you did the hard.
I'm sad to think that there's not marriage in heaven, but there's a good reason for it. I don't understand it, but I know that I'm going to be with him again. And, that's a huge part of my hope, is that this isn't over. I remember when we buried his body and, everybody was there, and I was like, hey guys, this isn't the end.
That's right.
He doesn't stay here forever. And when I made that tombstone and, you always try to make it a little bit lighter. Like, well, it's not like this is carved in stone. Like, okay, well, actually it is carved in stone, but it is still a temporary thing. Your tomb, your body being dead, for a believer in Jesus. So if you don't have faith, then it is a different story. But according to what I believe, this is a temporary holding place, and it's all going to get a whole bunch better really fast. And I just have this tiny little window of time. And that's really what's motivating me now, is I have this tiny little, I'm in my 50s. I don't know how long I get. I don't know, but I have this tiny little time that I can influence the world, and I can spread hope and uplift and carry. Like, that's all I want to do. Because it's all going to come. Like, all this good stuff is coming, and I can't wait. It's going to be amazing.
Oh, I love that, Amy. I have one last question, and it always ends on a light one. It's always a light question. What is your favorite guilty pleasure? What is the one thing that you do for yourself, just for you?
I don't know. I'm like really working hard to not eat sugar and not eat. So I'm just, okay, so it can't be that. Like, is it painting? Well, maybe it's painting. I don't know. I love hot baths. I really love a good bath.
Our sister loves it. I swear she is a prune. She was a prune in another life.
Yeah.
And so, not a prude, a prune.
Prune.
A prune.
Prune.
She was a complete
She's
red
wrinkled.
Yeah.
But not wrinkled like that.
No.
Yeah,
Wrinkled 'cause
just wrinkled from just
Water.
relaxation. Amy, thank you so much for being
Thank
with
you.
us. My gosh. I
I
mean,
have all my wisdom.
I'm sitting here like live in the moment, leave a legacy. The dating, like
The kids.
living here, inheritance of, and the organization Inheritance of Hope. I hope this, I know this will bless so many people. And whether the person that you're caring for has a terminal illness or not, the lessons that you've learned have nothing to do whether the person is going to pass or they're going to live, because that's the thing Jason and I have had to do. We've had to adjust our life, and we try to live as much today because we don't know what tomorrow brings.
And you'll never regret those days that you
No.
spent intentionally. You'll never be like, well, I wish I had just worried.
Yeah. Or I'd worked
No.
more. And so,
Or I'd worked more. Or I'd watched more Netflix.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
I could have caught up on that show. You'll never say that.
no. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
We love you. You are
Joy.
forever sister. Forever sister, ma'am. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today and for listening in. And until next time, until we confess again, we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, friends, that's a wrap on this week's confession. Thanks so much for listening in to the podcast. But before you go, please take a moment to leave us a review and tell your friends about the Confession Show. Don't forget, visit our website to sign up for our newsletter, as well as connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Twitter. You'll also find the video recording of all our episodes on the Confessions website and our YouTube channel. We'll see you next Tuesday when we come together to confess again. Till then, take care of you. Okay, let's talk disclaimers. We are not medical professionals and are not providing any medical advice. If you have medical questions, we recommend that you talk with a medical professional of your choice. As always, my sisters and I at Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver have taken care in selecting the speakers, but the opinions of our speakers are theirs alone. The views and opinions stated in this show are solely those of the contributors and not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted and no part can be reproduced without the express written consent of the Sisterhood of Care, LLC. Thank you for listening to the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast.